Greetings, everybody. How you doing? I am the Starving Martian, and today we're looking at Mars Attacks number 2, Counterstrike Part 2, Baptism of Fire by Topps Comics. And first of all, let's just get this out in the open. Man, this cover, huh? I tell you, it's amazing to think that just 30 years before, something like this was considered too racy. And and here we are. I think the guys at Topps and I think they kind of figure that they might have gone maybe a step too far, because this cover has never been reproduced for any of the trading card series. If you've watched my reviews of Mars Attacks, Invasion, Occupation, almost all the covers from the Topps days have been turned into trading cards. This one has not, and I think there's a very good reason for that. Obviously, Mars Attacks has never been about, keeping in good taste, but I think perhaps this exceeds the limit and maybe they realize it. Now, I do like the artwork on the Martians. Very creepy, very nicely done. As for the rest of it, well, let's just say I wouldn't let your 13-year-old nephew run off with this. But moving right along, this is actually one of my favorite issues from the Mars Attacks series. It plays off very much like, like an Aliens comic, except that the aliens are the Marines, if that makes any sense. The main focus of this issue is San Diego, where there's a infestation of giant ants. Now, if you remember, the Martians created these giant insects, but they cannot control them. So if they're going to take control of the Earth, they have to get rid of these giant insects. And so they're going in, they're bombing these hives and then sending in squads to clean out the survivors. Here, by the way, we see one of our earliest examples of a Saddam Eye. That's this thing over here, a Saddam Eye. The Saddam units are giant robots that the Martians use. The Saddam I stands for insect. There's also Saddam A, which stands for arachnid. Those are more spider-like. And they have a human head, you can see right over there, controlling them. It's really weird. But they made an action figure of the Saddam A, which I do not believe has any human head on it. But the Saddam Eyes certainly do. So we see the troops getting ready. And a nice 2-page spread here of Martian weaponry versus giant ants. And so with most of the ants in this colony cleaned out, remains only to venture into the hive itself and flush out the queen. That's why I say it reminds me of Aliens, because it's a bug hunt, man. But cut to Virginia for a little bit, where we're following the adventures of Woody Brown here. Young boy, traumatized by the events of the story thus far. He's gone feral. He's pretty good at the slingshot. He's able to knock down this squirrel with one hit and eat it raw, much to the chagrin of his aunt, who's taken it upon herself to take care of him. And we see that they're being watched, they're being monitored by 3 gentlemen here, and I use the term loosely, who, they've gone cannibal. They've gone flat out cannibalistic. It's a rough time in human history. Food is scarce, and so they've taken to munching on their fellow human, and this guy here doesn't look like he's missed many meals. So they're contemplating munching on old Woody Brown here, and they seem to have a worse fate in store for the aunt. We're going to have to get back to them next issue, because we're going back to San Diego. We're going back to the hive, where things are not doing so good. This Martian squad is getting picked off one at a time by these giant ants. And the thing I love about this issue is, even though we know that the Martians have invaded and destroyed and killed. We're still rooting for them throughout the course of this issue because the ants are the aggressors. You know, it's just something about the ants, even though we see them on a day-to-day basis, they're more alien to us than the Martians, being the size that they are. And so we're rooting for the Martians to succeed. And most of these Martians here are like workaday Martians. You know, they punch the time clock, they come in. They're not the type who orchestrated the invasion of the Earth. But in any case, we see this one luckless Martian here about to get munched. The sergeant does him a favor by blowing his head clean off his shoulders, making our green recruit here look even greener than normal. But pretty much says, I did for him all I could, what I would expect you to do for me. And while we're on the subject, I do owe an apology to our friends at Trendmasters, because when I did my review of the action figure, I noted that they made all of them green when the Martians in the series are not. They're more of a tannish. But there are green Martians, so we're going to have to let that slide. Sorry, guys. You did fine. Alright, now, back to Hilton Head Island for a little bit of gratuitous nudity. So here's Colleen MacKay. She's subject to various experimentation, and we did find out in the last issue that the Martians are curious about human reproductive abilities. They wanted her to reproduce with a gentleman. Unfortunately, before they could break the news to the young man, he had thrown himself off a balcony and was quite dead. And so they're examining her, as aliens do, and they've got her in a state of disrobement. And it's Payek here. He's commonly seen with her. They have a lot of back and forth chit chat. I don't know if he has a name in the story. She just refers to him as Payek. But you get the impression that he's kind of grown fond of her. Not in a way where he respects her as a person, but in a way where that you might like a favorite pet. And you know, he might not want to see any harm come to that pet. So he kind of sticks up for her a little bit, but not enough to do her any good. So she's put through several indignities, having to stand around naked in front of a bunch of aliens. She asks to be able to leave to use the restrooms. They inform her that there's a grate on the floor. She could just use that. She's none too happy, as can be imagined. Cutting back to San Diego, and more Martians getting eaten by more ants. And so they have to go. And go they do. So we catch up with our recruit here. I believe his name is Dosk, Private Dosk. So him and the sergeant are the only survivors at this point, but they've made it long enough to reach the queen ant. And so it's a bit of a milestone for them, but what they don't realize is that the Sarge is starting to leak air. He's got some cracks in the back of his protective suit, and that cannot bode well. So they reach the queen ant, and Dosk wants to know what we should do, to which he gets, "Good question, kid. No one ever got this far before." Well, that's reassuring. So they do what they do best. They run in, they open fire, they kill off the queen and her associates. But before they can celebrate their victory, the Sarge is overcome by Earth's poisonous atmosphere. And so he's like gagging on his own fluids, and the private has to put him out of his misery. Back to the Atlantic Ocean, where we find Rager here. He's our computer expert. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He has a grudge against the Martians, as most Earthlings really do. But he's also got a computer virus, which he's going to implant into their ship. Into one of their ships, which will piggyback into some others, cause them great havoc. And so they send a false distress signal, tricking the Martian fleet, who thinks that a submarine's about to surface. They could track down the submarine, and so when they reveal themselves, get too close, they're infiltrated with this computer virus, and we'll learn more about the virus next issue. But it's a doozy. Cut back to San Diego, where our private, now a war hero, emerges, chucking out the Queen's head ahead of him. He made her dead, and with her head he went glumping back. He gets promoted too. I promote you to sergeant. You shall receive other honors as well. Rest assured, we will not forget. And I love this line. Stuff it, bake it, then eat every damn bite. Yeah, he's been through the ringer. He's also cheesed off that his sergeant had faulty equipment, and that the Martians are, just like almost any army, the grunts are the ones taking all the risks and, suffering all the deaths. If he had just had better equipment, he might have survived that, but you kind of feel his angst, his pain. Come on. And speaking of angst and pain, getting back to MacKay, she is surrounded by Martians, her nice new black dress unceremoniously ripped from her, and she finds herself in a very compromising position, strapped down with no way of moving, while the Martians decide to bring her to the breeding room. Well, that can never, ever end well. Now, this is just a personal note, but the guy who does the art here also did the art for Topps Comics, X-Files comics. And the way MacKay is drawn here is sometimes very similar to the way he draws Agent Scully. And so sometimes in my mind I get the two characters confused, and it's just weird seeing Scully in this position, although there's plenty of fanfic out there, but best not to get into that. So the doors close, her Payek friend, quote unquote, is outside. His head's hung down in what? Shame, perhaps? Or, at least he feels bad about what's going on, but not bad enough to stop it. And we end with her still undergoing procedures, being told that the repetition cycle is twice a day for 7 days. And that if it fails, they will simply repeat the procedure using a different female. So, no sympathy for our good friend, Nurse MacKay. Back in the original miniseries, when her co-worker gets killed, and she survives with a mark on her forehead, the Martian insignia, she remarks that her dead co-worker may have been the luckier of the two, and it's starting to seem she may indeed be right. There's also a great ad here for Return to Jurassic Park. That looks like fun. So, next up, Martian Man-Eaters. And that looks fun, doesn't it? And that was issue number 2 of Topps Comics, Mars Attacks, soon to be a major motion picture. I mean, can you imagine seeing this cover? What kind of motion picture would you assume they were going to make? I don't know. I probably wouldn't have thought of anything like the one they eventually gave us. But, yeah, that's what we got for you today. So, come back next week. We'll have issue number 3 on review. But until then, this has been the Starving Martian, reminding each and every one of you, as always, to keep watching the skies. Catch you later.